Hello friends, just to catch you up with where we're at right now, since I did a little bit of work in your absence, I now have the neck attached. So I finished carving the neck, I installed the brass insert into the tenon, I carved out a little cavity for the truss rod extension, and ultimately I did the neck fit, which essentially means aligning the neck both laterally and aligning its pitch side to side, so that the string splay will meet the bridge appropriately. And then generally just really clean up that neck joint area, both on the neck side and on the body side, and get this thing glued and clamped down. Alright, so from here we are going to be, radius sanding, which is a lot of sanding. So let's get started with that. So I've set up a fence here in order to keep my radius beam nice and dead straight along the center line of the guitar while I'm sanding, just like this. Okay, so it's a laborious task for sure, and especially in this case because I have an ebony fretboard. On the last guitar I had a Wengi fretboard and it actually went pretty quick. Now the first thing that I can do to help myself out is take a straight edge, and I actually did this before I put the fence and everything on here, but take a straight edge and see where you're starting at. Essentially see if you have a lot of unevenness and big gaps, so that you can manually hit those areas with either a very sharp, well tuned up block plane, or something like a mill file, just to speed up the process, right? Because 80 grit sandpaper going across the entire board in the fashion that we're doing here doesn't go as quick if you haven't pre-shaped out the really bad areas, right? Now if you set up your neck joint really well and you're just really experienced with that, then you shouldn't have to do much or any of that pre-shaping anyway, and you can go right to the beam, and it shouldn't take too long. I mean, it's always going to take a little bit of time. Anyway, that is basically what we're doing here, and I'm going to turn on some music and jam out and enjoy this, because it's just mindless sanding from here on out. Okay, so I've got the radius established at this point. I'm just kind of going over it a little bit more. By the way, to speed things up, I use not just the radius beam, but also a flat leveling beam like this. So this is just some, steel that's milled flat. Perfectly flat. And using this in conjunction with the radius beam really helps speed things up, because this cuts across the grit marks, which are just running sort of straight in line with the grain. It cuts a little bit across the grain, which really speeds things up. And I'm at the point now where the radius is fully established, and this is where I like to add my side dots, because right now these I don't actually have the mother of pearl installed. I like waiting until right at the very end, then I install the mother of pearl, and then just give it a light sanding to bring the mother of pearl down. And the reason for that is simply because this is such a heavy sanding that we've done right here, that if I had installed these ahead of time, there's just a not unreasonable chance that I would end up sanding through one of those dots. So it just makes sense to me to leave those holes open until the very end. Okay, I think that's enough of that nonsense there with the beam for now. Let's add those dots. Very simple process here. Pick out a couple pieces that you like, and I'm gonna place that in there, and I want to make sure that it's at least a little bit proud of the surface. I don't want to push it down below that surface. part of that is, you know, making sure my holes are of an appropriate depth. In fact, sometimes, like this one right here, sometimes a hole is too deep, in which case I'll usually just stack 2 dots on top of each other. Alright, here's the extra deep one. So I'm going to tap that all the way down, below flush. Of course, you could just backfill this with anything, and not waste your dots, but the dot fills the space perfectly, and that's just kind of nice. And there's the second dot. And now water thin CA glue. Spilled a little bit. Okay, now back to the sanding beam. At the same time as leveling these, I like to also smooth the fretboard because right now it's all cut at 80 grit. So we can take this 80 grit off and we're going to replace it with 120. Then we will further smooth sand this with 220 and even 320. Although we won't be doing all of that on the beam. I have a smaller block and a soft block that we can do the final, very fine grits with. And this is the final grit right here, 320, so it's nice and polished. And with this same block that I put the 220 and then now the 320 on, I use this also to add a little bit of extra attention down here on the fretboard tongue, which hangs over the body, and that's to give me my Fallaway. Now the reason for Fallaway is because what we have is a fretboard which is partially on the dynamic part of the guitar, which is over the neck, and partially on this static portion over here. What I mean by that is this portion is dynamic because the string tension will pull the neck forward just slightly, giving us what we always refer to as relief in our fretboard, right? Where each fret kind of steps down from the previous fret on a sort of microscopic scale. That's our relief. However, when we get down to this static portion, our string tension isn't going to be giving us the relief over here. It's not going to be pulling that bow because of the stoutness of the body. So what we have to do, well, have to is a strong word, because actually most guitars, you know, commercially manufactured guitars, don't do anything like this. They just, you know, they just make the player live with it. But you can make your guitar play just a little bit better by giving a tiny bit of extra, what they call Fallaway, which is really just manually fudging in a little bit of a ramp right here in the fretboard tongue. And by a little bit, I truly mean a little bit. All I really want to be able to see is that with a straight edge on here, I can fit the smallest feeler gauge that I have, which is simply 1/1000 of an inch. Very small. You can see how, I was going to say papery thin, but actually paper is too thick. There's nothing to compare this to. It's 1/1000 of an inch. It's very small. And as long as I can pass that under here while I'm holding the fretboard straight, or right on the center, and actually, just a moment ago it was going under, but now I can't get it anywhere under here anymore. So I'm gonna Let me just make sure I got it by adding a little bit more. You know, another way to demonstrate just how slight this is the fact that I'm giving myself this relief with, in this case, 320 grit sandpaper is even enough to do it, or the 220. This isn't something I'm going to sand in with 80 grit. By the way, some people sand their relief into the frets themselves, by the way. There's kind of no right or wrong way to do this, although I feel a little bit better putting my relief into the foundation, which is the fretboard itself. But to each his own. I mean, you really can do a similar thing onto your fret tops after all of that's installed. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and we'll keep on going here. I am moving at warp speed, trying not to slow down, but also trying to be careful and do everything right. It's a difficult balance. And now this is something kind of new that I'm doing. I tried this on the last Parlor guitar that I did that's hanging up in the other room right now. What it is Tru Oiling the fretboard. So oiling the fretboard ahead of time before fretting, which normally on most guitars there's no finish on the fretboard. You just leave it as raw wood, and actually that's totally fine to do. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just tried this on the last guitar mostly just because I liked the look. I wanted to try basically having the entire guitar, including the fretboard and the bridge, be Tru Oiled. So that's just kind of the direction I'm going with things. I'm not sure I'll always do it, but hey, I liked it the last time, so let's do it again. Alright, so we're going to switch gears now and do the bridge. I've already kind of cut out the shape for this mustache shaped bridge right here, and I've got my template right here so we can stick this down and drill out the holes. This will just give us something to do while that coat of Tru Oil I put on there is curing for 2 hours, and then I can apply a second coat, which will put me at 8 p.m., 8 o'clock at night at that point. And if I put on that coat right away, then 2 hours later it'll be 10 o'clock, and I can put on the third coat, and then after that I can start installing my fret wire, because I think 3 full strength coats of Tru Oil, meaning it's not cut, it's straight out of the bottle, will be enough for that fretboard. 3 coats will definitely be enough. And then I think I'm going to play it a little bit dangerous and install that fret wire without even waiting for that last coat to dry. Honestly, if I don't touch the board and I'm very careful with it, I can do such a thing. Or so I think. So, anyway, you know, it's kind of interesting to talk about just how tight this timeline actually is. If everything goes perfectly without any issues coming up, which is a crazy thing to even say, so basically in the most optimistic case, what I'm looking at is at the end of the week I will have to, in order to get this done, I will have to spend 2 days applying coats of Tru Oil at 2-hour intervals, sleeping during those 2-hour intervals between the coats, but then always setting my alarm and waking myself up and applying another coat. I can't simply just do 4 coats a day and then sleep for 8 hours like a normal person. So I just want to let you guys know, this is truly really pushing it here. I've never done this before. It's going to be crazy. You're going to get to see me with very bloodshot eyes by the end of this. Alright, let's get to work. We're drilling holes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is getting pretty late here. I just finished shaping this bridge. So I had to carve, or actually I didn't carve, I used the disc sander and the belt sander to get a variety of angles that I have in here. But then hand carved the back edge here, the round over. Anyway, that's all neither here nor there. I was gonna, like I mentioned before, hammer some frets in, but actually it's getting pretty late. I think instead I'm gonna keep working on this bridge until I collapse. So what I have left to do this bridge is actually a good sort of mindless activity. I'm going to sand the radius into this bridge, which I do right on the top. So we'll take this top protector off. And I'm gonna just place down some 80 grit sandpaper right over the area where the bridge eventually will be glued. And we're just going to sand the sand in order to give us our mating surface, so we get a perfect conforming between the glue surface of the bridge and the glue surface of the top. A little bit of chalk here just to be able to monitor our progress. Once all that chalk disappears, we know we're there. And the key is just, as always with sanding, but especially important here, is to not give excessive down pressure, or in this case really any down pressure at all. I think of it as just grazing across the surface, because our top was built to be resonant, right? So that means if I'm pressing down, I'm actually taking my radius surface and I'm temporarily making it flat while I'm sanding. So then in the end, when I pick this up, if I were pressing down, I would actually have a flat mating surface and not a radiused one, which is what we want. Anyway, this is where I'm at, this is what I'll be doing, and this is how I will spend the rest of my evening. So, anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.